My talk for today is called, What Do You Want? What do you want? Man, this question gets asked so much. It is such a big question that happens sometimes many times a day. I'm not somebody who's ever struggled with that question. I've always known what I wanted since I was a little kid. It drove people crazy because I was very quick to say, this is what I want. And through the years in watching people struggle with what they want, I've learned a few things in talking to them and watching them and seeing how that goes. And so I come to you today with some of the things I've learned about watching folks who struggle with what they want. And one of the biggies is that I want to let you know is that everyone knows all the time what they want. All the time. But what happens is they have these unconscious or conscious thoughts or other things going on in them, and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of them today, that make you think that that isn't what you want or isn't a good idea. And then what people struggle with is what they want second. Anybody would struggle with what they want second once they actually know what they want, which they know consciously or unconsciously anyway. Here's an example. My wife, Ash, asks me on a regular basis, what do I want for dinner? I know what I want. Chocolate cake. Pizza. Ice cream. Yeah, for dinner, not just dessert. But I have this larger want of being healthy. And an even larger want than that of wanting to be healthy so that I can come here and keep doing what I love doing, which is being with you guys. And so what I wind up saying is, I don't know, you choose. But it isn't that I don't know what I want. It's that I have a deeper want. And so, and even this morning, right? I had to be here this morning at 9:30 for rehearsal. And my wife asked me, what time do you want me to get you up? And I had said earlier that to be here at 9:30, we have to leave at 9:15. And I said, wake me at 9:15, because that's what I want. I got up at 7:30. So it isn't that we don't know what we want, right? Another thing that gets in the way when we know what we want, but we don't think we know what we want, is process. It has to happen a particular way. For me to have what I want, first this has to happen, then this has to happen, and this has to happen. Really? Are you sure? Because process, if that's what you're focused on, can create hell. I read this book back in my 20s. I think it was called The Oversoul. I'm not positive of the title because the one thing that stuck out in me about this book was what they call an allegory. And it was these two rooms. One room was marked hell and the other was marked heaven. And in the first room, the one marked hell, was this big table filled with this glorious feast. And all these people sitting around the table, tied to the chair, one arm tied to their side, with a spoon that was tied to their hands, which was too long to get into their own mouths. And you just saw them sitting there struggling, trying to get that spoon into their mouths of the food, and they couldn't do it. And that was considered hell. In the next room, labeled heaven, was a big table filled with a glorious feast, with all these people sitting around it, tied to the chairs, one arm tied to their sides, a spoon too big to put in their own mouths, too long tied to their hands, and they're feeding each other. Talk about getting stuck in process. That creates hell. And as a side note, because this is one of my pet peeves in the world, is when I hear anybody say, I want to be independent. I got to do this myself. Well, all you got to do is try to stop breathing, and you'll find out how dependent you are on air. Stop drinking, because you want to do it yourself. And you'll find out how dependent you are on water. How dependent we are on trees to create the air that we get to breathe. We are dependent. We are codependent on this planet. I love when I hear people say, well, there's a difference between interdependency and codependency. Not really. We are emotionally attached to our lives, which get to be because of the air, the other beings that exist on this planet. We are in a relationship, whether we like it or not, and the stance of interdependence leads to hell. So I don't recommend it. I recommend, as a spiritual practice, understanding and breathing into the relationship that we have with everything going on around us. All the time, every moment. And if you're having some sort of stance of, I got to do this myself, I'm just saying you're creating your own hell. And it's just so much easier. It's so much more loving, less suffering, when we breathe into our interdependence, codependence, whatever you want to call it, that we have in the unity of the one that we all exist in. So reach out for help if you need it. You're much better shot at getting what it is you want. And if you feel like there's nobody out there to help you, look around. In fact, take a moment now to welcome the folks around you. This is a good time to do that, because these are the people we're creating community with. Say hi, say welcome. This is a great way to create what you want, to get to what you want, to dig down and go deeper into what it is you want. Now, another thing that gets in our way, besides process and trying to figure out what we want second, is when what we think we want is what it looks like. And we get stuck in what something looks like instead of the actual quality it is we're after. It has to look like this. I'm not going to be happy until I have this looking like this. Boy, talk about creating a box for yourself. My favorite example of this actually takes place in golf. There was this guy who, from a little kid, all he dreamed about was being a pro golfer. And he practiced and he practiced, and he was on the high school team and college team, and he was practicing and practicing. And he had a coach, and he did everything he could. And no matter what he did, it turned out he really didn't have a lot of talent at it. And best he could do was break into the top 100. See, he was pretty frustrated. But this was his dream. Now, one thing he was good at was computer programming. So he built, this is a true story, he built a computer program to help him get better at golf. And the computer program was so good that it shot him up from being in the top 100 to the top 50 on tour. And the pros, they took notice. And they started coming up to him and going, the people he admired, his heroes who he wanted to hang with, started coming up to him, going, how did you do that? And he said, well, I built this computer program. And they said, well, I want that computer program, and I'll pay you for it. And so they not only paid him for the computer program, they started calling him up, inviting him out to play golf on the side, not on the tour. And so now he's hanging with all these people he loved. And they're giving him a lot of feedback about his program, which he keeps improving, until one day they come up to him, some pros tell him, the top pros in the world say, you know, if you release this to the public, you'll make millions. And so he did. And made millions. And so he's being interviewed on some show, and they're asking him, do you feel any disappointment that you didn't really make it? I mean, you're on the sidelines. And your dream was to be on the pro tour. So do you feel any disappointment about that? And he said, no. He said, I didn't even know that what I really wanted was just to hang out with these guys. These were my heroes. And now they call me all the time, invite me to play golf, invite me out to dinner. They love me. And I have none of the pressure of being out in front of public playing on tour. He said, I had no idea that this would feel as good as it does. But if he'd been stuck in it, it has to look like this, he would have been miserable. Instead of opening to the larger want, the larger heart's desire that was in him, that he was able to rise with, that was his to do. I want you to know right now that there isn't a single person on this planet with a heart's desire that you don't have all the resources you need to make come true in your world. It doesn't matter if you are open to the fact that the process can look very different from what you thought. If you are open to the fact that it doesn't have to look a particular way and can still be incredibly fulfilling. If you open to those things, you get to have your heart's desire. Everybody does. It's only when we're stuck, it has to look this way. Then we get disappointed. And then going even deeper into our heart's desire, somewhere along the same lines, if you run into a brick wall, it may be because you haven't gotten to your heart's desire. That it would be worth taking another look. That there's something about the quality of what you're after, and that you're stuck in that it has to look this way. It's not just hell, but can actually be a brick wall. My favorite story around this comes from a man named Quincy Jones. If you don't know who that is, he produced all the Michael Jackson records, every one of them, and arranged the music for all of them. Years ago, at one of my myriad of jobs, was at Polygram Records. I was in the accounting department. And one of the things I did in the accounting department was read all the artists' contracts. Because I wanted to know, what people got, to know what to think about when I reached that point. And one of the contracts I came across was Quincy Jones. And in the 50s, he had a 7-year contract in which he was only paid a nickel a record sold, and the most he could make was $10,000. that they capped it. And that got me curious, and so I started checking deeper in and found out that that was true for every black artist. Not the white artists, but the black artists in the 50s, that they all had 7-year contracts and they were all capped at $10,000 was the most they could make. Well, let's go forward a number of years, and another one of my jobs was driving a limo for Saturday Night Live. And one day, Quincy Jones is the host, and I'm driving him around. So I got to say to him, I read your contracts and how horrible it was, how they treated you back then. And so we got into a whole conversation on racial injustice and really connected. And so when he got out of the car, we got to hug. I got to hug Quincy Jones, man. It wasn't long after that, I got signed to Paul Simon's management company, and I got a record deal with Warner Brothers. And so I got invited to this party. And I go to this party, and Quincy Jones is at the party. And so I go up and say hey to him, and I had this burning question, which is, did he still play the horn? Because that's how he had all those hits he had with Polygram, was playing the horn. And he goes, no, man, I haven't played the horn in years. And I said, why not? He says, because I have an aneurysm, and if I continued to play, I would die. And he could see my face, and like draining. And he said, no, man, it was the greatest blessing of my life. If I hadn't stopped playing the horn, I would have never discovered how much I loved arranging and producing. That had never even occurred to me before that moment where I realized I couldn't play the horn anymore. That if I'd been attached to that, I wouldn't have met Michael Jackson. I wouldn't have made some of the greatest records ever made. That I got to do that all because of not being able to play the horn anymore. If you run into a situation where you feel like you hit a brick wall, I promise you, it's offering you a greater opportunity. My deal with Warner Brothers didn't pan out. My life in the music business did not pan out the way I had anticipated. And I stand before you so grateful for that. I would have never discovered the depth and breadth of who I am today if I had made it in the music business. You don't know until you know. You know what I mean? So you go along, and I'm not saying don't follow that first dream you have. But if you run into a brick wall, don't think it's because you don't get to have what you want. You do. We all do. And we all have the resources to get there. And how we get there is when we hit that brick wall, to look. What is the greater thing here? What is my greater heart's desire? For Quincy Jones, it was playing music. It was arranging. It wasn't the playing itself, but it was just being in the music. It turns out he loved arranging and producing way more than he liked playing. Now me, it turns out I love being with you way more than I ever liked being with musicians. Those ego crazy people. Well, not that I was. But that's what it is, we get to go deeper. We get to love ourselves even deeper. Self-care even deeper. You know what you want. If you're not sure and you can't see it, I promise you it's there. Keep looking. So next week, what we're going to do is a ritual. We're going to dive deep into what you want. What is your heart's desire? The ritual has as a do every time, several parts to it. The first, diving in. The second, getting support from the rest of your community for what matters to you. So I hope you'll come back and join me for what should be a very powerful and deep ritual next week on this same topic. What do you want? If you don't know what you want, this is a way to discover it and then get support for it. If you do know what you want, this is a way to get it more solid within you and then support for it. This is how it goes, right? It's not just me up here talking. Let's have an experience of it together. This is the greatest teaching I've ever found because it allows us to go deep into ourselves. Nobody's up here telling you what to think, what to do. Just how to discover your own soul's intention, your heart's desire, so that it can be there for you, so that your life can be joy-filled and have a high quality of love, light, and beauty. I love you and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.